event called It's a Wrap, which is all about screenwriting and film. And I just would like to introduce our host, who is renowned film critic Amber Wilkinson, who knows everything about film, and she's going to ask our three fantastic panelists a range of questions. And I hope you all enjoy the event. And I am going to try and avoid my minute and go.
Right, well, good morning, everybody, and I'd like to introduce our wonderful panellists for this morning. So Samantha Horley is a freelance film and TV consultant and screenwriter, and she was in international film sales as well for 20 years. Hees is a BAFTA-winning and Oscar-nominated producer and director and founder of Bridgeway Films, and James McSill, who is an author, storytelling consultant, educator, and the founder of McSill Story Studio. So yeah, blimey. Quite a CV amongst you, that's all I can say. And it's funny, I was looking at this sort of massive sort of wealth of knowledge that you all have now, and I was thinking, what do you wish that someone had told you? What's it? Excellent. Oh, before I forget, actually, before I ask you that question, if anybody
my telephone on.
Hang on.
Oh, just a second. Oh, had to be me. Right.
No, I've got a cat situation.
Okay, James, we can't hear you. If you can just unmute yourself. Just while James is unmuting himself, if anybody who's watching this has any questions that they want to put to the panelists, feel free to do it, and I'll ask them as we go along.
Right.
Okay.
So all out.
Okay, so as I was saying,
In this room now, they're checked out.
it's fine. But I was thinking, you know, you've got decades of experience between you all, and what's the one thing that you wish somebody had told you when you were sort of starting out in terms of script writing? I mean, James, do you want to start?
Well, the things I work with people who are writing scripts most of the time anyway. And when I started, I think the first thing I thought is that stories were much more straightforward than they were. And the other thing, I think when I started, I thought they were not as magical and as transforming as I found out they were later on. So I think those were the two most important things that I learned when I started. And I still think nowadays it's like stories are actually transform the world. And movie magic, when I say movie, could be like TV or cinema, etc. It's something really amazing.
Yeah, how about you, Samantha? Because you've had experience across such a wide range of the industry as well.
Yes, and a wide range of films and genres, and you know, commercial and art house, and yeah. So, I mean, I do a lot of lecturing, so I get to tell a lot of people. My thing is just watch everything. You know, I'd say watch a lot of movies, watch a lot of TV, watch the stuff that you've heard is bad. You know, because you've got to see the bad stuff in order to be able to unpick why it's bad. And I find it regularly. I find people don't watch enough movies or are snobbish about movies. That's the other thing. We're in my industry. We're just not snobs about material. We just aren't. You know, a good film is a good film. And lastly, watch, you know, if you're a British writer, watch British films. That's the other really big problem, is that you have people coming in and they name their favourite films, they're all American ones. And they're trying to write a British film, they didn't watch British films. So that's one of my big piece of advice, because I was that child who just soaked up everything. I just watched absolutely everything.
Yeah. How about you then, Chris? Do you feel the same way? I suppose similar for you, you know, you're working across animation and live action.
Yeah, soaking up content is hugely important in all sort of varieties, and not just those things that you love, because actually there's lots of things that I love in cinema that I don't think I'll work on. Like, I have different sentiments, but still love, like, you know, getting scared by horrors. But I don't know whether like horror's the space that I will ever kind of inhabit as a producer. I don't know. So I mean, for me, the biggest advice I think that I, as a producer, try to give writers and even, you know, projects that I'm working on myself is just kind of when the time feels right to share your work. There's too many kind of filmmakers, writers holding on to what either they've previously done or something that, you know, they're waiting to be perfect. And, you know, certainly as a producer who works with writers, like I'm not looking for a perfect script. You know, I'm looking to collaborate creatively with a writer. So send it over and, you know, it's my job to see the potential in it, both from creatively, from the point of view of a market, you know, whether it can get made, etc. So share your work, and if it needs to be with trusted people to begin with, then, you know, that's fine. It doesn't even have to be filmmakers.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah,
may I? Because I completely agree with that, but it's just amusing, if you like, that I'm working on something right now that, as a consultant, that someone has sent over. It's not someone that I knew, so it's kind of slightly out of the blue, and I don't often do that. And it's a TV script of 79 pages, which is already showing amateur status, because, you know, it's a pilot. It should be a TV hour, 56, 57 pages, maybe a couple more, so you can see where you can cut down. There's no act breaks, either written in or guidance. There's a new character introduced every other page. So I'm halfway through, and there's probably been about 40 characters introduced. And then in the action, it doesn't introduce who's in the room. It's literally, so I'm reading one scene and this character appears, and I have to kind of go back and go, I didn't know they were here. Did they arrive? Oh no, they literally haven't. So there's, you know, there are certain formulas and formats, structures that are accepted that will, you know, that if you don't put it into that format, you're gonna, like, it'd be like me just kind of going, okay, this is a really amateur writer.
Yeah, so you need to basically, you're saying that the groundwork's really important, those sort of basic things. It's interesting as well, Chris, what you're saying about collaboration there, because I was thinking, James, you work with writers' rooms, that's right, isn't it, that sometimes? And so do you find that is very a helpful way of working? Because obviously a lot of people, I think they think of scripts as a lot of scripts being created in a kind of lonely place, with a writer in a room on their own, and you know, coming together and like you say, Chris, maybe hanging on to them too long before they.
Yeah.
Samantha has just said something which is very interesting, because when we writing a script is just like writing in a foreign language, so you do have to learn new rules, and it's very interesting because whenever I have to work with like a writer's room, and they say, well, we've written scripts and all that kind of thing, and then I realize that sometimes they know the format, but one thing is like knowing the words and know where they fit in, etc. Another thing is being able to read a script. Because the thing is, of course, I mean, we have the word read, but the word read is like, we think like reading a book, reading a recipe, etc. But reading a script is something very different. So a very simple exercise that I do with them, I say, well, right, let's get some scripts and let's create like a picture in our mind. So you read, but you don't think in terms of words. You read and you create this picture. So that if you say like, well, now it dissolves, it goes. Now enter that character. It's capped. So it's the first time it's coming in, and that kind of thing. So you have to teach them just like teaching a foreign language, or like to read in a foreign language. And after that, after reading, you write. It's very much the process of second language learning. Then you have to start writing in that kind of language. But the moment you writing a script, and Samantha knows, or Chris knows possibly that better than I do, is the fact that you're writing, but you're creating an image, and that's a real challenge, because they think of the writing, they say, oh, but look at this. And when it comes to like dialogue, one of the things I say is, well, first we're going to write just like pictures. I don't want any dialogue whatsoever, because I tend to say, well, like cinema, it comes from kine. which means movement. Yeah. So I said, well, I want movement. I want something happening. I want to create a world. I want to create sensations. After that, then we think of whatever else. Yeah? And so I think that's the first thing that I do when I'm working with a bunch of writers. And after a while, they grasp the language and they can read and write quite well. But also, I think, as Chris said, it's absolutely, it's never perfect. It's collaboration. Yeah, it's pretty amazing because just now we're going through the editing process of a Portuguese Brazilian film, filmed in Lisbon with a few Brazilian actors, and of course I wasn't the producer or the director or anything. It was just the story consultant there, and I met a few of them. But today, so last night, I was having a look at the credits, and I was just wow, so like all those people are there to make it happen. Yeah. And it's pretty amazing. So in terms of storytelling industry, or storytelling industry is fabulous, because when you're writing a book, you're practically alone. You may have your editor, your agent, or someone there, but it's like 4 or 5 people. Whereas when you're working on a piece like a film or a TV series, a telenovela, it's pretty amazing the number of people. So we have to learn to write, read, and collaborate. I think these 3 words.
And it's interesting that you say about, the writing kind of coming alive as a picture, because we were briefly talking about this before, Samantha, worked with that, and you were saying that, was it Emma Thompson had said that she was sold on a script purely by her character description?
Yes, exactly. And so that's kind of coming back to, I've got a cat here who's known for knocking the camera out, so I'm going to drag him off the table. Sorry about this.
We love extra collaboration. Just trying to
believe him, except he knocks the camera out every time. Yes, no, so we were talking about it before, which is that also you must write the script as absolutely beautifully as you possibly can. And I'm on a lot of writers' forums, and I see kind of aspiring, screenwriters arguing about you should need to put the most basic description, the most basic bit of action. But actually going back to actually what James said, I suggest that you do try and read scripts like books. You want to, people say to me, how can you read so many scripts? How do you know if they're any good anymore? And I say, do I want to finish it? Do I want to know what happens? And that includes reading the action. And, I write comedies, and I always make sure that the description of the action is also funny. So, so it really, really gives a flavour of what the final film could be. And I see writers arguing about, you shouldn't give too much because it's, you leave it up to the actors. It's going to be a long time before your script is in the hands of an actor, a long time. So your script is really your showpiece to get whatever it might be, to get to a producer, to get to an agent. People want to know that you're a really good writer. So as well as, adhering to a formula, respecting, the formula, it's also about knowing your genre inside and out, and using beautiful words.
Yeah. I was thinking, especially with animation, Chris, presumably, a lot of that isn't dialogue. A lot of that maybe is the physical setting of what's going on, or movement within it. So particularly in that case, presumably you do need that extra.
Yeah, absolutely, because you can't guarantee, there's a lot of the animation adds such a different layer, and it's quite different to live action in that way that, there's lots of elements in live action, like cinematography, editing, sound design style, that can shift something into a different genre, a different tone, but sort of no more so than animation. If you're doing kind of a cartoony, Pixar style, or you're doing like a dark rotoscope kind of animation, those 2 films will feel very different, but you don't see that in the script. So the script in and of itself has to be an enjoyable story first and foremost. We'll get to discussing the animation, but yeah, there are bits. I'm working on a William Golding adaptation at the moment of his novel The Inheritors, and it's all about the kind of Neanderthals, the end of their kind of existence, and the new people coming in. And there are moments in that where the Neanderthals are seeing things for the first time. So like a bow and an arrow being thrown at one of the Neanderthals, and him thinking it's a gift. But he turns to the right, and suddenly like a stick's grown out of the tree in his mind, because he can't get his head around it kind of coming to him and hitting the tree. And there's other elements like that. So we have to write that in as if we're putting that audience in the place that they will be when they see these things for the first time. So description is hugely important in animation, and it can be a different style of writing. I think as well, you have to have an appreciation to what extra layer animation can give you.
Yeah, and as well with the collaboration element, I mean, to what extent do you think it's important for people to remember that in a way you're ultimately collaborating with the viewer at the end of this process? They're the ones who are going to sort of take that in. I mean, is that something you think writers need to hold in their head all the time, or do they just need to take it from the heart and hope for the best, or what do you think?
I actually lecture on this I do a one-day lecture on audience, and absolutely. It's really, you need to be very, very clear about who you're writing for. In film, it's trickier because it's not like, in TV, you have a commissioner who wants a specific thing for a specific time for a specific demographic, and it's really, really, really clear, as well as down to the page number, how many minutes it is. I mean, some of the streamers are a bit different now. But in film, a lot more gets written on spec and basically, thrown out the window to see if it flies. And so I do an awful lot on considering the audience, but also that's about genre, about how understanding how films are sold to you down the line. So we are all audience, and it's about paying attention to how we watch movies.
Yeah, I think like crudely, your audience, in a business sense, audiences are your consumers, and therefore will bring the money, to those who have financed the film. So the financiers, the sales company, everybody these hurdles you have to get over, these sort of gatekeepers, so to speak. You have to persuade them that an audience is there to buy a ticket, to get a subscription because your film goes on it. So you always have to have the audience in mind, and that doesn't need to be every, I get people talking like, there's this new term, 4 quadrants, where it's like you're basically aiming for every single audience type, and your big tentpole films can try and do that. But if you're an independent film, it's about knowing your audience. Like your audience can be a more of a niche audience. It doesn't have to be millions and millions of people, but you really have to know it and know who you're servicing to, when you're writing a script, because it's both an art form and an industry.
I can tell you that I read a script a few years ago by someone incredibly famous, but not incredibly famous for writing screenplays. And I said, I'm just not sure who the audience is for this. And his response was, not sure I believe in this who is the audience thing. Anyway, it never got made.
As I work a bit with soap operas, in terms of script writing, it's in a way it's great fun, because you have to write tonight to be filmed tomorrow, and sometimes just to be aired at like 7:00 that very same day. And but in terms of audiences, it's quite interesting, because it's things like, especially soap operas in Brazil are so popular, and there is now, well, you can measure, like when Samantha is there in a specific scene, the audience goes up. She leaves the screen, the audience goes down. So the very next day we have these meetings. This where that bit worked, that bit didn't work, etc. So we do have to think of the audience, and we have to sell to the audience, which is something that at times when I'm dealing with filmmakers who have, like, I'm going to use the word dreamer here, but they dream of their film being something, a piece of art, etc. But when you're writing soap opera, it's just like selling, at times hard selling. So my experience is slightly less glamorous that I believe that what Samantha does.
It's like a marathon and a sprint
I've worked
situation, isn't it?
I've worked on some very, very lowbrow films. I worked on, back in the day, I worked on Barbed Wire, which is Pamela Anderson's film. So, there's no snobbery around here. And actually, I really love that because it's you're talking about a very clear audience. And, you mentioned the sell. It's all about the sell. If you're writing a script, you're going to be trying to sell it. You're even going to be trying to sell it to your mate to read, let alone trying to sell it to a producer, trying to sell it to an agent. It's all, it's about the persuasion of even getting someone to read your script. No one's going to read your script unless they think it's going to do them some good, i.e. they're going to make money out of you, or they're going to be able to make it, or you're an exciting new voice. And if you can't come up with a sort of what I call the two-line pitch, you can't come up with a two-line pitch that is going to sit in, going to arrive in my email and I'd go, here is my, I would love to send you my script. It's boom. Go, oh. So it's about the sell all the way down the line. From the
because when you said something like that, you had this person who said, well, no, I don't believe in this audience thing. That's something that I come across quite often.
Yeah, me too.
And so people say, well, like, what you do is not really X, Y, Z, because I don't believe in this kind of audience thing. So it comes out of my heart, and if it's me and a camera, so I can tell a story, and that's it. Yeah. And of course, I don't operate in a kind of industry that a camera in your hand and an idea in your head, and then you have a film. So.
I mean, I think even sort of more indie, at the indie end of the market now is much more influenced by audience because of all the social media that we have now. I mean, even if you're not maybe going directly to, an audience on television like a soap opera, there's still people out there who are going to talk about their reaction to your work. Do you think in a way that's maybe partially a good thing, though, in terms of kind of diversity in the industry and driving it to tell more diverse stories? I mean, Chris, do you think
quite a lot well, diversity is very good indeed. I like short films and all the festivals, and of course lots of people coming together to work for free, and so they present an idea and they go to film school and they have all their shorts and their films or whatever. So that's fantastic. But the thing is, that's not what moves the industry, because as you jolly well know, it's very expensive and demands a lot of money, a lot of investment, and so it's not just like a camera, an idea, and that's going to work. And I'm just going to be the next Oscar winner next year with my short, because possibly it's not going to happen. So in my case, I do work with the money-making industry, so I'm not very acquainted, except some friends of mine, when they say, well, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, etc. So they want to discuss art, which I find fascinating, but entertainment most of the time is just a money-making machine. You cannot propose like to a TV station, like for example, to Global Network, say, well, can you produce this series of this soap opera? And it's not gonna make any money. You're gonna run a loss. It's not gonna happen.
I mean, Joe, I was thinking
very
though,
tough.
As well, about sort of diversity in terms of the people that are represented, the cultural scope that's also represented. I mean, Chris, what do you think about that?
I mean, look, across the industry, there's a big push, that should have happened a long time ago for more inclusion. I think, this is the word that should be used, perhaps more than diversity. And, I think, yes, in every aspect of the industry, this needs to be looked at. But you were sort of talking about critics and the influence that they can have. And I think, there's a big push at the moment to have more diversity in the critics. I think we could try and name 3 big critics now, and they're probably all white males of a certain age. And so if they're the ones that people are kind of thinking, oh, do you know what, I'm going to see what so-and-so says about this film, then they have a very different experience than perhaps someone, that person would have a different opinion on maybe rocks or something. So I do think this kind of peer-to-peer opportunity that social medias give films to kind of create attraction is incredible. You know, I think something like YORStory, you know, was huge. Was that last year or the year before? Because of that peer-to-peer kind of publicity that it had. I mean, it had a big sort of, you know, marketing budget as well, I think, after all the kind of view fuss that it got. Universal put a lot of money behind it. But yeah, I mean, diversity is hugely important. And for that to happen, it has to happen across the board, from people who are making films to people who are critiquing films to people who are selling films. So
yeah, and I suppose it's made, I think as well, I don't know if you agree with me, Samantha, but I think some of this is about maintaining a momentum as well. Like this year, the Oscars and the BAFTAs have made quite a lot of they put a lot of effort into trying to be more inclusive in the way that their categories have worked, and it shows. But I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like that momentum is something that will have to be continued going forward.
Well, it's about letting filmmakers tell their stories, and I know that, you know, I have, you know, black and brown friends who are still basically raging that some of the bigger production companies are now telling black stories, and they might hire one black person, and, you know, there's the rest of, you know, and so a friend of mine was like, why don't they hire me? You know, they should hire me to be an actor on it. So, you know, if these stories are being made by diverse filmmakers, fantastic, and if they are helping the industry expand. But I know I mean, I'm on the Writers Guild of Great Britain, and we're still hearing some really horrific stories about racial microaggressions going on in the industry, and so that's all part of the bigger picture that we need to address seriously in order to bring filmmakers in and keep them in and help them tell their stories.
Yeah, I mean, Isabel Russell's just asking you a question, actually, Samantha. She's saying that earlier on you were saying that you find that aspirant writers in the UK don't often watch British films. So how do you persuade them to do that? And she's also asking, James, we'll come to you in a moment, but do you find that it's the same in Brazil, or do you think this is an English language situation problem? So maybe Samantha first.
Yeah, I just find it astonishing that people who want to be filmmakers don't watch films. So it's not my job to persuade them to do that. I used to do this game that, you know, I started out with fun. I do a lot of lecturing, and I'd be like, all right, everyone stand up. And I'd start naming sort of the top 10 proper indie films of the last, you know, 12 months, and find out how many people had seen them, watched them, you know, knew what they were. And there were many, many occasions that, you know, I'd get people to sit down if they hadn't. Sorry, is that my Wi-Fi going wonky? And, you know, so, and I, you know, it started out as kind of a fun game to see what people are watching, and it turned into this kind of the shaming exercise. And I think if you don't watch a load of films, you shouldn't be trying to be a filmmaker. It's really simple.
I think in the particular market as well that you're working within, you know, you're going to start if you're in the UK, then those kind of people who are going to give you that finance to start out the BFI, the BBC, you need to look at what films they're making, you know, not simply the ones that are in the Oscars race or at Cannes every year. You know, look at what closer to home, because there's a reason why, you know, those gatekeepers are choosing those films, and you have to kind of look at that a little bit more than some people do.
As I said before, you've got to watch, even if it's got 1 star and it's in your genre, you know, there's a good chance. I mean, I watch a lot of films that I don't like, and because that is my job. That is homework. You know, watching films should be fun, obviously, but it's not always fun. And if there's been a film that's in your genre in the last year, that's done quite well or had a lot of attention or something, you're sitting in a room with an exec, you know, or a producer, and you haven't seen it, you're going to be embarrassed. Yeah. I've got cat hair in my mouth now.
So, James, do you think that it's the same?
Right. So about the same thing in Brazil. However, the Brazilian film industry doesn't have the same appeal worldwide as the British. So, for example, when Samantha says, well, no, if you're a script writer in Britain, you should see British films rather than sometimes American films, etc. So for Brazilians, it's much more important at times to see what's going on in America possibly, then Brazil, then like Britain, France, etc. Or at times, depending on your aspirations, what's going on in America nowadays, what's going on in China, which is something that we tend to forget, what's going on in Britain, and what's going on in France. So it's very hard work actually, because they hope that somehow some of those films are just going to break the barriers, and especially because of Netflix now. At times you can get one of your films, you can get a series like break into the world market. As we go on to Netflix, there's quite a few Brazilian series there, films, etc. But they cannot just stick to watching Brazilian films to make a Brazilian film.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about Netflix, because I do wonder if that also has driven perhaps quite some sea changes in the market. I mean, things like, for example, you can be looking on Netflix and a film comes up and you don't realize it's Brazilian because they use the English title, for example, the English language title when you're in Britain.
Some are dubbed as well.
Yeah. So do you think that that's perhaps helping audiences to try new things, encouraging them to sort of sample?
Netflix is wonderful in that respect, because at least it gives some confidence to Brazilian filmmakers. I've got several friends who say, well, that now my film is on Netflix or my series on Netflix, so I'm someone. Because I think it's in Britain, America, you have this attitude that, well, we're British, we're American, somehow we're Australians, so we produce better, we know how to do it, so we kind of created this industry. And whereas in Brazil, they always think, well, second rate somehow. It's one star, as Samantha put it. So they always think of themselves as being one star, which is not true. Sometimes there are wonderful things. But within Brazil, they've got a kind of, they call a market reserve, which 20% of all films by law should be Brazilian films to be shown on a theater. So that helps in a way, but they know that at times their film is there because of legislation, not because of audience, which is kind of humiliating in a way, So when you are there, it's the atmosphere is so different from like Britain or America.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well. I think that do you think there's more opportunities now for scriptwriters because of this sort of boom in streaming services? Samantha, I mean, do you think that that's there or not?
I don't know. I mean, I think, obviously we've got, we haven't even talked about sort of COVID yet and the effect of that on filming.
I was trying to leave it towards the end. I feel like everything's so COVID now. We should try and talk about some of the things first.
Look, I think that I'm going to go back and say it's all about if you've got something that's got a really clear target audience that looks like can make money, then you have a shot as an up and coming writer. If you've got something that doesn't have an audience, you don't. And if you're going to dig your heels in and say I'm not changing it or whatever, and that is about the hook, it's about the pitch, it's about the audience, it's about whether it can be made at a certain budget level, which obviously writers don't necessarily know. But so I think there will always be a market for new writers who've got a great story that's got a very clear market.
Yeah, how about you, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the streaming services is maybe, and I think we'll see a little bit more in the next couple of years now that the likes of Netflix are kind of making more here. They're not just a streaming service that, provide us with American content. I think that will mean that a lot more opportunities maybe arise. But I think very much at this first early stage, they'll go to writers they know, writers with, kind of a portfolio. So, I'm not sure it's there for the startup writers, but things may change because, they've got to keep providing for that service, that we're all paying monthly for. And so, I mean, they're committing a lot of money. Sky Cinema have committed to releasing 52 films a year, so one a week. Netflix, Amazon, and even, you know, the US has a lot more streaming services we don't even know about that may end up pushing into the UK at some point. So I think there's more content being created. So hopefully in the long run that will mean, you know, more opportunities.
I think that in Brazil it's a growing market. There's quite a lot of opportunities because of the streaming services and because of legislation. Because for Netflix to operate in a place like Brazil, they've got a certain quota of Brazilian productions. HBO, they've got a huge studio in Rio now, and Amazon Prime is coming in, Disney is coming in, and they have to have something local. So that gives quite a lot of opportunity. I would actually know percentage-wise what that is, you know, but it's a thriving market.
Yeah, I mean, it's as we've now mentioned the pandemic. I guess it's a good time to briefly talk about that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are consuming a lot more things than probably they would do normally, because a lot of people have more time on their hands. So that there's that. But I remember one of you was saying the other day that you feel like it's maybe having a bit of an impact on writers, in that you're not getting out of the house to get the inspiration to write.
I think a lot of my friends, you know, a lot of people have been sort of saying, oh great, you know, there's kind of COVID allows you to stand still, and maybe you can just focus on development, and because no production's happening. So, you know, there's so many times I think we watch films and we go, oh, I just wish that I've spent more time on the script. You know, so that's kind of true. But I know a lot of writer friends who have really struggled in COVID and the lockdowns, when there's no stimulation creatively for them. You know, watching shows isn't enough for them. Some of them, they soak up life, you know, and real events, and or it's just harder for them to talk about the projects that they're going through. I know Zoom is great, but I think Zoom still feels quite agendaed. Like, you know, you kind of have a Zoom meeting even within development, and you have your things you're going to talk about, and it's less fluid than if you go for a coffee to just chat story. So yeah, I do think it's having perhaps a negative effect in that kind of creative stimulation, for sure.
It's interesting because due to COVID, chatting story to what I do has helped a lot. Unfortunately, unfortunately about COVID, but in terms of like collaboration, you know, from March next year to like March of this year, it's a huge growth in collaboration, because I remember that most of the time I'd have to travel abroad and be there, and just now I can be part of conversations that I wouldn't have been part of just a year ago or 2 years ago, because people are getting more used to Zooming, Skyping, and also sharing screens. And if the other day they were editing, and I don't understand anything about editing, but they had the camera on and they were sharing screens. And so in many ways, the COVID pandemic has helped me to understand the industry a lot more, because I think one thing is like they're filming a soap opera, and I had helped with something with the script, or met the actors, but just now I can be sort of part of sometimes a future process, because they're not doing very much filming at the moment. But at least now, if they're editing something, if they want to talk about something, they just call and we chat story, and we chat a storyline, and we exchange a message. So people are getting more used to technology in a way.
That's interesting.
That's my experience, of course.
Yeah. Because Samantha, you were saying though that actually sort of writing though, the business of script writing involves often a lot of people watching ahead of time. But that, of course, is something that you can't do.
Honestly, on a personal level, I've found it very, very hard, and I found it very hard to be creative. And between lockdowns, I went and caught up with a writer friend of mine, and I left at the end of the day, just this dinner, sort of buzzing with creativity, and I realized that I'm getting it off I get it off other people. It's not even working on a project together. But the other thing is, so I've got a pilot that I've written that you know, my agent and I both agree it's the best thing I've ever written. It's gone out to a couple of producers, and, you know, as my agent says, another infuriatingly positive no. So we know it's good. We know it's good. And, you know, people come back and say, look, we got something too much like that or whatever. So he and I had a big chat about it, and one of my producer friends I was thinking about it anyway. A producer friend said, look, I suggest you write the novel. And I spoke to my agent about it. He goes, look, I think that's a really good idea, because it's a really, you know, it's more likely to get out. You know, things, you know, a lot of stuff isn't getting made, especially stuff from new writers. As Chris said, people do go to people that they know. I'm still a kind of new writer on the scene. And so my agent is basically like, you know what, you write this novel. It's you know, it's a thriller. It's an out and out thriller. And, you know, if that can get out there, then, you know, he can sell the film rights or the TV rights as well. Sure. And actually it's less reliant on, you know, that can be produced. I can produce that and present it, you know, as a book. So that's that's currently what I'm working on.
It's interesting because it's sort of that way that I feel like sometimes script writing seems to be a kind of interesting mix of stayability, sticking with something sometimes for quite a long time, but also flexibility, you know, that ability like you to pivot to a book if you think that it's going to work better for you. Because I mean, I think we were saying that a lot of people don't realize just how long a script can be in development for. I mean, we were talking about Kevin Costner and The Highwaymen. I mean, that script was 15 years in a desk drawer somewhere before it got picked up by Netflix and made. So in a way, I suppose you do have to realize that you could be with a piece for a long time.
Well, I mean, is it what's it called, the Queen's Gambit? Is that what it's called? Well, that was famously in development for 10 years. So, and yes, I mean, I've known lots and lots of things that have been around for a really long time. And sometimes, you know, life passes by and they become, you know, irrelevant, and they, you know, they need to be given a good kicking. Or sometimes things come around again. Or you can repurpose, or you know. So there's a friend who's got a project. It's really, really, really good, and it's not been made. But I feel in the current climate, it won't get made now. It's literally the last couple of years. You know, he's a white filmmaker. It's a black subject. It's, you know, it's from a white viewpoint, and I think that needs it's a big rethink in order for that to get made. James, you're back on twice.
Yes. Am I back twice again?
No, it's gone now.
Yeah, just like I got my phone from there.
With what Samantha was saying, like, that comes round to audience again. You know, you always hear these stories where writers have something in the drawer for 5 years that suddenly becomes relevant, and so they start putting it in front of producers. Or sometimes it's to do with actors. I think the King's Speech suddenly happened because Jeffrey Rush got hold of it. You know, and then as a producer, I kind of need to package, you know, the value around a very good script. So there needs to be value for me to raise finance. And, you know, that actor saying, oh, actually, I really love this, let me commit, was enough to then, you know, start the ball rolling when he got it to his mate Colin Firth. So, you know, it's you never know, and you're right, it's very hard to know when to stop a project, because you become so close to it, and you invest a lot of time in these things. So, but yeah, you do have to kind of know when to drop projects. And again, that's why collaborations are so important, because, you know, if you have a producer you work with or friends who are also writers who can really talk honestly with you, because more often than not you do get those really nice no's, you know, and it helps 0% in knowing why, because you don't, and it is frustrating when you hear that it's we already have one of those. So you know you've landed on something, which is obviously
exactly,
you know. So, but that'll come round again. So,
and just what do you think life is going to be like after COVID?
Oh God, that
Yeah,
question.
That's something. That's a question I'm
Please,
asked all
please
the
let it be
time.
better.
What's
well,
going to happen next year?
maybe we should be talking about, you know, material and COVID being in there as a storyline, because I think that's something that's coming up a lot in terms of discussions around, you know, should it be in there? You know, is it pre or post COVID, or is it just not going to be mentioned? And a lot of the time I think it's just sort of not going to be mentioned. I think that's a lot of the sort of mainstream TV feels like it's just going to not be mentioned. But actually my novel that I'm now going to write, that I'm now plotting, I'm actually setting it just after COVID, where a character goes to buy, she goes to buy this old, it was going to be an old rundown youth hostel, but I'm actually making it a former old people's home where most the residents have died of COVID. So she's got it cheap. So, you know, I'm kind of like starting to put things in that at least will, you know, it will place it, that's for sure. But I'm gonna try and be a bit creative out of it. Actually, that's not funny at all, because that actually did happen, so we shouldn't laugh about it. But, you know, I'm now trying to find ways at how it may, to seed it into how it's affected this village, basically.
Yeah, and I'm sort of not sure. I think it's funny, the things that I will remember in the last year and a half, I think if you ask me 3 or 4 years, or the things I hope I remember are the you know, the Black Lives Movement matter having a bigger push, you know, everything that's now happening with the safety of women, like, and girls, like all of those things. I think we will remember in history. No one's going to want to remember that year that you was just at home and not that much happened. So I think, but you know, so directly I think we may make films about those other bigger subjects, but indirectly I think there's a growth in mental health, social anxiety, and I think more films are going to be made about that, as well as just wanting a feel-good factor. You know, we have a project about the first pilot to fly from the UK to Australia in 1930s, Amy Johnson. And, you know, it's an adventure film about, you know, a woman kicking ass. And I think, like, people are going to want to actually see, if they can't travel, or they're enjoying traveling at that moment, someone traveling the world, you know, places they haven't been able to go to. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what we're making in 3 or 4 years.
I'm interested to see how these elements of COVID are incorporated. You know, things like masks, for example. I don't know about you, but sometimes you see a film and there's a big group of people and you're like, oh my goodness, they're all too close together. You know? And I know there's been some discussion about James Bond as well, you know, when that finally gets a release. Is it going to seem really weird because obviously it was shot in a pre-COVID thing? I mean, with the soap operas, James, are you being more reflective of the pandemic situation, or are we just pretending it's not happening?
Well, just now we're pretending it has never happened. So because most of the time the stories are ongoing, so we cannot incorporate COVID in a story. Some period dramas, for example, it would be impossible to do that. But eventually it is going to be incorporated anyway, just like the yellow fever or any other pandemic. But we still don't know how, you know, that's going to be incorporated into stories, because the thing is, like, in Britain has been reasonably dramatic. But for example, in a place like Brazil, if you see the news like this past week, today, it's over dramatic. So it's actually bad taste as it is, you know. So we've got to see how it's going to be reflected like next year, and also it very much depends on our call for a certain type of entertainment piece that we're going to produce, whether or not we're going to incorporate that kind of situation. So it remains to be seen. It's too early for that. You know? But my question was actually about the industry. You know, how do you envision the entertainment industry, the film industry in a couple of years' time? So it's going to be like more opportunities for script writers, for consultants.
It's hard, but I think there are some benefits. Obviously, it's been horrific for freelancers, and there will be. I got really frustrated. I'm in Dublin at the moment, and I got really frustrated watching the RTE news because they sort of, the last thing in the news is always the feel-good thing, and it was a story about how people in the theatre had managed to get other work, and you had this incredible dancer who was now working as a carpenter, and it was like, isn't this great? And it's like, it's so frustrating because their whole love for the art has been destroyed through this thing, and a lot of those people won't be able to come back. And we've fought, we continue the fight for the kind of inclusion from a socioeconomic point of view as well. And we'll see a huge gap in that in the next couple of years because people haven't been able to survive unless they have more, wealth in and of their family. So I think it'll have a really bad effect in that sense. But then some big organizations have been able to step back and put more time into making themselves better and pushing certain initiatives. So maybe in the long run that will also help and balance each other out. Who knows?
What do you think, Samantha?
Well, I know a lot of people who are retraining, or utilising other skills, or doing completely other things. And I think, I've had a lot less work. It's been really tough for me in terms of even just sort of consulting work. So I think that it's going to be really hard. It's like my agent was saying, there's a lot less getting made. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see whether that gears back up again. I actually, in terms of screenwriting, I wanted to pick up, if I may, jump back a little bit
absolutely,
and pick up something that Chris was talking about in the last couple of years. I think, and about Black Lives Movement and the safety of women and girls. And there is something that I do a lot when I'm doing my feedback. I always have a line that says relevance, like, why is this relevant? And that can go to anything. So, was it you say with Amy Johnson? So like, that is something that is very relevant now, isn't historical. It's about, empowerment of women, and, and people want to see that. So, and I did a little talk about, writing period films or writing period product. And I did a comparison of why Bridgerton worked and why Rebecca didn't. And, Bridgerton is sort of fantasy stuff, and it's wonderful. And, it's not pretending to be realistic. And yet, it stands there as a period piece. And it's beautiful, wonderful. Everybody absolutely loved it. It was, it's what everybody wanted out of a romance. But then you look at something like Rebecca. Now, there was an opportunity there to retell Rebecca properly with female writers, female filmmakers, and to actually explore what is essentially an entire film about gaslighting. But no, they filmed it in a really pedestrian way with kind of dull actors. They could have, put some really exciting talent in there. And, Ben Wheatley is a really good director, but, I think was the wrong director for that. And so I think, there is a way to, and I know lots of, talking about this amongst female writer and director friends, it's like, what a shame that is, because it's going to be a few years before, a female filmmaker is going to have a crack at that and really open it up in a really interesting way. Yeah,
we're not even thinking about male directors for Amy Johnson, and there are plenty out there who would do a great job, I'm sure, but they wouldn't do the right job for that particular project. They'd make it an adventure film about a woman who did this amazing thing back in history, and the material we have a lot. We can do a lot more with it. Like, time has gone where it's just enough to make a film about a woman doing something for the first time. We can delve into the kind of nuances of these characters like never before, because audiences are accepting it and the industry's woken up to the benefits of it. So, in terms of the relevance, we do a lot of that. I love adapting pieces of work, and we have the William Golding projects that I was talking about, and we have a novel called Little Boy Blue, which is by Edward Bunker. And that's a novel written in the 70s, set in the 50s in the US. And we're making it contemporary UK because it's about a boy's journey through the care system and the failings that the industry, that industry gave him. And the UK's care system is one of the worst in the world. Young boys in particular are killing themselves in those places in a scary rate. And so we read this book, and we've always loved Bunker as a writer, and we thought this, like, now we watched Joe Plumbing did an incredible BAFTA-winning documentary where it exposed Medway Care at Home, and we thought the time is now to make this film, even though it was, written 50 years ago by an American. We can make this into a British film. So we do that all the time, a film about the Neanderthals. Why do we want that to see that film now? But I think because it's a moment, it's perhaps one of the earliest origins of racism and the fear of otherness. So that's why we're making that film. And that's why we think audiences will be attracted to it.
I want to see that film.
Yeah, who doesn't want to see it?
Well, we're raising finance now, so
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true that this sort of idea of relevance, and also sort of enduring relevance to a degree, when people are writing a script, that maybe thinking past the immediate situation that you're in to the fact of, will this story that I'm telling be still relevant in 2 or 3 years' time, 5 years' time, especially if it's a film script, presumably. That's important for it to have sort of an ongoing life once you've finished writing it.
Yeah, I think so. Although I love watching, like, I'm not like one of these audience members who watches the same film multiple times, because there's so many amazing films made every single year, TV series made every single year. I know friends who have watched the same film like 10 times or something.
Just Star Wars by any chance?
Yeah.
Me with the Gone of the Wind, I've seen that so many times. Avatar, I may have seen that about 20 times.
Wow. You see, unless it's Home Alone at Christmas, I'm not sure I'm watching a film more than a couple of times. But I think I see it also as part of my job. Like, Samantha was saying, I kind of also spend far too much time watching terrible films, and I try and watch a film every morning because I'm an early riser, so I'll watch a film that perhaps my fiance won't like, which means I'm watching sometimes very dark films in the morning, which doesn't set my day up very well. But yeah, so. Did
you watch one today?
I watched a TV series that I was going to. Actually, interested, like Your Honor. It was the Bryan Cranston one on Sky, and actually, halfway into that series, because they had to continue production, they started incorporating the pandemic into the series. The second part of it is kind of the courtroom drama element to the first 4 episodes, kind of, crime. And they said, the judge was like, look, we can't now suddenly have a room full of people, so we're going to have to do this with just the jury. And they started incorporating that into the script. It was really interesting. So, yeah, but I watched The Father the other morning, and that was tough, all about dementia. And then
it's a really great film though, no?
Yeah, it's incredible. And then I watched Supernova the next day. So a double bill of dementia wasn't,
The Father's actually a good example of that way you can incorporate the physicality, the picture that James was talking about. Actually, it's a very good example of that, because it's not just reliant on dialogue, it's reliant on a lot of things moving around as this old man is sort of slowly succumbing to Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
What's interesting about The Father is that, I've been watching how it's being sold. And if you look at IMDb, which is where filmmakers or the company get to put the material, and I'm looking at all the emails that come in from BAFTA and BIFAs, and so that's all the PR companies are writing material. Not a single, the word dementia and the word Alzheimer's is not used.
That's incredible.
It's not used because that would be off-putting. Otherwise it becomes the dementia movie, and that puts people off.
Yeah, you know, and this is what, this is exactly what I think. I kind of like force myself to watch films because I feel like I have to. But certainly, my fiance kind of feel that she's mood based as well. So if she doesn't want to put a downer on her day at the end of a day, if there's a heavy film, so yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And actually, it is about dementia, but there is a better way of selling that film. It's incredible, you know, incredible film.
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely amazing piece of filmmaking. I saw it like it's a year past January since I saw it, but of course COVID came and it never sort of got a release. But it's a shame in a way. But you think, what happens when an audience goes to see that not knowing those things about it? That it is
That's
about.
what I love about festivals, you know, like there's so many films that I have no idea what I'm about to sit and watch, and it's incredible, and it's fun, and that doesn't even have to be kind of you know, European heavy films or anything. That's like, I remember one of my most enjoyable moments at Cannes Film Festival was when I sat in an afternoon in the big cinema to watch Inside Out. You know, and it had no publicity by then, so I had no idea what this Pixar film was going to be, and it knocked me for six. I cried, I laughed. It was an incredible experience, and I think I'd have gone into it a bit differently because it had been brandished around the whole, you know, sides of buses and had that Pixar marketing spend. So I'm glad I didn't, you know.
I had a moment like that. I had a friend, I actually had a bit of spare time, and a friend who was editor at Screen International at the time said, come watch a movie this afternoon. I was like, oh my God, I'd love to. I never get to watch a movie at festivals. Yeah. So what are we watching? And he said it. And I actually, for whatever reason, didn't make the connection. So we sat, lights going down, titles come up, it's 137 hours. I'm like, oh, what's that one? And then it goes, it's like, oh, I'm about to watch someone cut their own arm off. I was not prepared for this. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called 137 hours, isn't it? My brain isn't working.
127 hours.
127 hours.
Yeah, a little less. It's easier than 137.
But yeah, I mean, I think those festival spaces as well for script writers can be quite important as an opportunity to meet other people, the script writers, the people in the industry, all of those things. So I suppose that's something that, you know, when the pandemic ends, we'll all pick up again as well, you would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the film festivals have done an amazing job at keeping stuff online and keeping going. It's been really incredible. But, you know, and this kind of goes back to the sort of films that you choose to write. If you're writing drama, if your film gets made and doesn't get into a festival, it's dead. So it's, you know, if you're writing any kind of drama at any level, whether it's tiny budget or big, but whatever it might be, they all rely on, because they rely on, you know, the validity of being programmed in the first place by a decent festival. And that's where the critics go and review stuff. So that's when the word of mouth starts happening. So, you know, Chris, you were just talking about that. Like, I mean, there's some classic films that sort of come out of film festivals where the buzz, you know, you just start hearing on the grapevine about the buzz. The Artist, that was one that was just sort of came out of nowhere and ended up winning, you know, obviously, you know, Weinstein picked that up. But, you know, but you start hearing, you know, and, you know, I don't even go to film festivals anymore. I just happen to have a lot of friends who are still in the industry, and we're all on social media together. So you just start hearing, and that's really exciting. But that means there's got to be something in that film that generates the word of mouth. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. So it can be a scene or a performance or whatever it might be, or there can be just something unbelievable, you know. So and we've all been consuming via word of mouth in the last year, much more so than we ever have before. So, you know, this goes from everything from, like, you know, Tiger King to I Will Destroy You to Normal People. So all these have just become the must-sees. And, you know, if you haven't seen it, then you can't be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, imagine Parasite without the word of mouth. Like, wouldn't have had anywhere near the level of success that it did have. And that was one that came out of the festival. You know, it was, everyone was saying, have you seen Parasite? Have you seen Parasite? And, you know, I know people who were going to festivals, it was programmed to specifically watch that film.
Really?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased that we've been able to sort of end this on a more positive note, really, which is good. So, well, thank you all so very much for chatting to us today, and yes, all the very best as we go forward.
Thank you.
Good
That
luck
was
with all the
great.
budding writers out there. You know.
Thank you so much, Samantha, Chris and James, and thank you, Amber, for hosting that so brilliantly. You can now see the role of a critic is also to sort of wade through people and their ideas and their creativeness and sort it out, which has been fantastic. Now, our next event is on at 12:30, and it is Break a Leg, and it's actually a similar event, but it's about the language of theatre. So if you'd like to tune in for that, that is free, and you can get that on the same YORStory's website and the YouTube channel. But thank you so much again to Chris Hees, James McSill, Samantha Horley, and Amber Wilkinson.
Right, with 1% battery. Thank you. I
Made it just.
made it. I made it.